My parents kicked me out at 16 after a false accusation, then begged years later when the truth came out. Reddit stories. They believed a lie instantly and erased me overnight. Years later the confession came, but by then, my life no longer belonged to them. Hi, I'm Caspian, 26 now, but the story that detonated my entire life started when I was 16, the night my cousin accused me of something so serious, so nuclear, that my parents didn't even wait for the police to finish talking before they threw my belongings onto the porch and told me I no longer lived there. And if you think that sounds brutal, trust me, we're barely scratching the surface. Back then, I lived in a house where every emotion Iris had, every tremor, every frown, every teenage meltdown, was treated like a glass bomb nobody was allowed to drop. She was 15, lived with us since her parents died, and my parents practically built their personalities around protecting her. Meanwhile, I learned early that the best way to avoid trouble was to become invisible. Which, apparently, worked a little too well. Iris and I weren't close. Not enemies, not friends. We orbited around each other the way two planets do when they know collision will end badly. We didn't talk, didn't hang out, didn't interact. I stayed in my room, she stayed in hers, and that worked fine for everybody. Then one night, just a normal, nothing special night, my best friend Mario and I were playing Black Ops in my room. Door cracked open, controller in hand, headset half dangling. Just teenage stuff. Nothing weird, nothing dramatic. And then downstairs, I heard my mom say Iris's name in that voice, the one that meant something very bad had just surfaced. There was a smell. Sharp, skunky, unmistakable. Weed. Mario didn't smell it at first, but I did. And before I could say anything, the stairs thundered with footsteps. Heavy. Angry. Purposeful. My bedroom door slammed open so hard it hit the wall and rebounded. My dad stood in the doorway gripping a hammer like he wasn't sure whether he meant to fix something or destroy it. He didn't look at me. He looked at Mario. Go home. Now. There's polite. Please leave. And then there's the kind of tone that makes every hair on your arm stand up. Mario packed up like the room was on fire. He shot me one confused glance, just one, and left. The second he did, everything fell apart. My dad didn't ask questions. Didn't explain. Didn't even breathe between steps. He walked straight to my PS4 and smashed it. Once. Twice. 3 times. Plastic cracked like bones. Dad, what? Stop! He didn't. The console spilled onto the floor in broken pieces. Then he grabbed me by the neck, not choking, but locking me in place, and dragged me out of the room. Down the stairs. Into the living room. My mom was crying on the couch. Iris was curled next to her, shaking. There was a tiny plastic bag on the coffee table. My dad shoved me forward like he was presenting evidence. Look at him, he said. And Iris pointed at me with a trembling hand, whether from fear or performance, I couldn't tell. He touched me, she whispered. Everything stopped. What? I said louder than I meant to. He did things to me, she said, voice cracking perfectly on cue. And just like that. My parents believed her. Instantly. Fully. Without question. My mom whispered, "Don't speak to her. Don't even look at her." My dad whispered, "How long?" And I hadn't even been in the same rooms as Iris half the time. I said, "I didn't. I swear. I didn't do anything." But my parents weren't listening. My mom was already dialing the police. 10 minutes later, I was in handcuffs. Not arrested, just for safety, they said. Right. On the ride to the station, I stared out the window, numb, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, not that night, but in the last 16 years, that made them believe I was capable of that. Hours later, the police finished questioning me. They didn't arrest me. They didn't believe Iris enough for charges, not yet. They drove me home. It was almost sunrise. And on the porch was everything I owned. thrown in piles. Clothes, shoes, backpack, textbooks, socks, my basketball, my pillow, all of it. The door was locked. I knocked. It opened just a crack, the chain still on. My dad's face appeared. My mom stood behind him, eyes red. "You can't come back," he said. "You're not our son anymore," my mom whispered. And then they shut the door. I didn't sleep in a bed again for a long time. And that's where this story actually begins. People assume homelessness happens like a slow slide, missed bills, bad luck, one thing after another. Mine happened in a single sentence. "You're not our son anymore." 16 years old, standing on a porch full of my belongings, watching a door close like it was sealing off an airlock and ejecting me into space. The police officer who dropped me off didn't know what to do. He hovered awkwardly on the sidewalk, shifting from foot to foot. "Is there anywhere else you can go?" he asked. I stared at him. 16. No money. No relatives I could call. No one my parents hadn't already poisoned with whatever story Iris fed them. "No," I said. His face softened just slightly. "There's a youth shelter I can call. I'll figure it out." The lie left my mouth before I even thought about it. He hesitated, then nodded, gave me a card with numbers I'd never call, and left. The moment his cruiser drove off, the street felt colder. My house, my childhood home, was now just a structure I wasn't allowed inside. I shoved as much as I could into bags and loaded it into my old junker car, the one my dad constantly threatened to take away if I didn't smarten up. Funny how quickly that changed. When I closed the trunk, the house was quiet. No lights on. No movement. Like they were pretending I'd never lived there at all. The moment I pulled off the street, I had my first real thought. Where do I go? I drove aimlessly through neighborhoods I'd grown up in, past houses I used to trick or treat at, past the school I wasn't sure I'd ever see again. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot around 2 a.m., staring at the building like it might have answers. I slept sitting up in the driver's seat. Calling it sleep is generous. Every 30 minutes a noise would jolt me awake. A cart. A car. A stranger walking by. My neck felt like it was made of rusted metal. Morning didn't feel like morning. It felt like another weight on my chest. I didn't go to school. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, sorry I missed first period. I was kicked out for a crime I didn't commit, and spent the night in a parking lot next to a shopping cart corral." I washed my face in a gas station bathroom and stared at the mirror. My reflection didn't look like a person anymore. By day 2, fear turned into something quieter, numbness. The kind where everything feels far away, like the world is happening behind glass. My phone finally buzzed once. "Mario. Dude, where are you?" I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. What was I supposed to tell him? That my life had detonated because my cousin wanted to avoid getting caught smoking? That my parents believed her over me instantly? That I was living out of a car at 16? I didn't text him back. Not because I didn't trust him. Mario was the only genuine friend I had. But because part of me still hoped this nightmare would reverse itself. That I'd wake up. By day 3, my joints hurt from sleeping in the car. My ribs ached from being curled up. My eyes burned constantly. I drove around looking for somewhere to exist. That's when I saw it. A tiny cafe with a faded sign and a "Help Wanted" paper taped crookedly in the window. I stared at that sign for a full minute. I had no resume. No work experience. No address. No stability. No credibility. But I had a name I wasn't allowed to use anywhere else. I walked in. It smelled like coffee and bread, warm, safe, nothing like the cold air outside. A man in his 40s stood behind the counter wiping down a machine. Tired eyes, kind face. He looked at me, then at my clothes, then back at me. "Help you?" he asked. My voice cracked. "I saw the sign. I'm looking for work." He studied me for a long moment. Not suspicious, just reading between the lines. What's your situation? He asked. I swallowed. Complicated. He nodded once. You 16? Yes. Know how to clean? Yes. Know how to listen? Another yes. He tossed me a rag. Start with the tables. We'll see how the day goes. Just like that. No interrogation. No accusations. No, what did you do wrong? Just work. Just a chance. For the first time since my world exploded, something made sense. That day changed everything, but not in the way I expected. Because that cafe wasn't just a job. It was the beginning of a life my parents would regret not being part of. I didn't plan on the cafe becoming my whole world. I just needed somewhere to be that wasn't my car. But day 1 turned into day 2. Day 2 turned into the end of the week. And the end of the week turned into Julius, the owner, handing me an envelope with cash and saying, "Come back tomorrow. Same time." He didn't ask where I lived. He didn't ask why a 16-year-old needed work this badly. He didn't ask why my clothes were always wrinkled or why I'd show up with dark circles under my eyes. He just let me work. For the first time in days, I felt like a person again. Not a suspect. Not an embarrassment. Not a ghost with nowhere to sleep. A person. But my life didn't magically stabilize. I was still sleeping in my car. Still checking over my shoulder in parking lots. Still waking up with a stiff spine and fingers numb from cold. Every night hurt. Every morning hurt worse. But I had work. Which meant I had purpose. And purpose is a hell of a powerful thing when you're 16 and have nothing else. About 2 weeks in, I was cleaning the espresso machine when the cafe door opened, and I froze. Mario walked in. He looked tired, frantic, like he'd searched every street in town. It took him 1 second to see me. 1 second to recognize what was happening. "Dude, you work here?" My throat tightened. "Yeah." He stepped closer. "Where the hell have you been?" "I went to your house. Your dad said you were gone and wouldn't talk about it. I thought you were dead in a ditch somewhere." I looked down at the rag in my hand. "I'm fine," I lied. Mario's eyes scanned me, my clothes, my posture, the exhaustion I couldn't hide. "You're not fine," he said. "Where are you staying?" I didn't answer. He swore under his breath. "Is it your car?" Still no answer. Julius, from behind the counter, called out gently. "He's working. Talk to him after the shift." Mario held in whatever panic was eating him alive and nodded. He sat at a table the entire time I worked. Didn't order anything. Didn't take his eyes off me. When the cafe closed, I met him outside. He didn't yell. He didn't judge. He just said, "My parents said you can stay with us." I shook my head. "No. They'll ask questions." "They already did," he said softly. "I didn't tell them everything. Just that you needed somewhere safe." Safe. It felt like a foreign word. I told him, "I don't want to get anyone in trouble." He stepped closer. "Cass, you didn't do anything wrong." I looked away. "My parents think I did." "Screw your parents," he said, no hesitation. And I don't know why that broke me. Maybe because no one else had said it. Maybe because someone was finally angry for me, not at me. Maybe because I had spent nearly 3 weeks pretending I wasn't drowning. I didn't cry. But my hands did shake. Mario saw it and very carefully didn't mention it. "So," he said, "you coming home with me, or am I dragging you there?" I almost said no. I almost said I didn't deserve help. But the thought of another night in that car, another night staring at the roof, waiting for something to go wrong, finally tipped me over. "Okay," I whispered. Mario nodded, relieved. And that night, after weeks in parking lots, I slept in a real bed again. But this wasn't the turning point. The real turning point came 3 days later. Because 3 days later, the police called me back in. Not as a suspect this time. but because Iris's story wasn't adding up. Her timeline cracked. Her behavior cracked. Her details changed. And suddenly, after my parents destroyed my life, the truth began to leak out. I didn't know it yet, but this was the first sign of the collapse that would eventually expose everything. And it was also the first sign that my future might still belong to me. The officer who called me in wasn't the same one who cuffed me the night everything blew up. This one sounded calmer. More measured. More cautious. Caspin, we need you to come down to the station to clarify a few things. Clarify. A word that felt like it had teeth. Mario insisted on driving me. He sat in the lobby while I went into the same fluorescent interrogation room I'd been in before, the one where I spent hours trying to convince adults I wasn't a monster. This time, the tone was different. The officer sat down, opened a file, and said, "We've been reviewing statements." I swallowed. "Okay. There are inconsistencies," he continued. "Serious ones." My heart didn't leap with hope. It twitched like an exhausted animal, too cautious to celebrate. "What kind of inconsistencies?" I asked. He leaned back. "Your cousin's timeline changed multiple times. Her description of events doesn't match the layout of your home. And certain details she gave are not physically possible." I didn't breathe. "We're not filing charges," he said. "We don't believe her story is credible." Those words should have felt like freedom. But all I felt was the echo of 3 weeks in a car. 3 weeks of being erased. 3 weeks of fear and shame and disbelief painted onto my name. It wasn't vindication. It was a diagnosis. "Everything you endured? It was for nothing. We will likely re-interview her," the officer added. "But you're not under suspicion anymore." I nodded slowly. He closed his file. "You can go." That was it. Case closed. Not with apologies. Not with outrage on my behalf. Just closed, like it was a clerical error. I walked out dazed. Mario stood up instantly. "What happened? Cass? They don't believe her anymore." Mario blinked. "So you're cleared?" I nodded. He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for weeks, and maybe he had. "Dude," he said, grabbing my shoulder. "That's good. That's really good." But my chest felt hollow. "They're not telling my parents," I said. "What?" "They said they'll handle it. But they're not calling them." Mario stared at me. "Your parents kicked you out. They threw your life away. They should hear the truth." "Would it matter?" I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I already knew the answer. 2 days later, Julius asked why I'd been gone for a bit. I didn't tell him everything, just that I'd had to clear up a misunderstanding. He nodded slowly and said, "You can always choose to be better than what happened to you." Simple words. Heavy meaning. And a tiny part of me believed him. Life settled into a strange pattern. I worked mornings at the cafe. I stayed with Mario's family at night. I tried to rebuild routines, even while knowing I didn't have a home to go back to. Mario's parents didn't pry. His mom left folded blankets on the couch. His dad showed me how to fix a leaky faucet one evening. It was more kindness than I knew what to do with. But the quiet truth lingered. My parents still hated me. Still believed I was something I wasn't. Still didn't want me. Until the night everything changed. It was a Friday. I was closing up the cafe, wiping tables, stacking chairs. The bell over the door jingled. I didn't look up right away. Until I heard someone whisper my name. "Caspin?" My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. Iris stood in the doorway, thinner than I remembered, eyes rimmed red, arms trembling in that dangerous way, not from fear, but from withdrawal. She looked wrecked. And for the first time since the accusation, she wouldn't meet my eyes. I need to tell you something," she said. And every chair I'd stacked, every wall I'd built, every piece of myself I'd stitched back together, started to shift. Because the girl who destroyed my life. Looked like she'd finally realized it. I didn't speak. Not because I didn't want to. Because I couldn't. Something about seeing Iris standing there, trembling, hollowed out, looking nothing like the girl who'd pointed at me and said, "He touched me." It short-circuited my entire brain. She stepped farther inside the cafe, arms wrapped around herself like she needed to physically hold her pieces together. "I shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I know I shouldn't. But I didn't know where else to go." I leaned on the counter so I wouldn't move toward her or away from her. Neutral. Careful. "What do you want, Iris?" She flinched. A flinch. Not a guilty one. Not a dramatic one. A real one. "I need to tell you the truth," she said, voice cracking on the last word. I waited. She rubbed her face with shaking hands. "When they caught me with the weed back then, I panicked. I'd never seen your dad that angry. I thought they were going to send me away. Or yell. Or—" her voice wavered. "So I made something up," she said. "Something so bad that they wouldn't focus on me anymore." She looked at me through wet eyes. "I didn't even think about what it would do to you." For a split second, everything went silent. No espresso machine humming. No cars outside. No beating heart in my own chest. Just, finally, the truth. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel vindicating. It felt like a bruise someone pressed on hard. "That lie," I said slowly, "destroyed my life." "I know," she whispered. "I know." And I didn't understand how bad it was until everything fell apart. She tugged at the sleeves of her hoodie. I noticed faint marks on her arms she probably tried to hide. "After you left," she said, "I thought things would get better. That they'd stop hovering. But they didn't. They smothered me. Treated me like glass. I couldn't breathe." Her laugh cracked in half. "So I started sneaking out. Drinking. Then, harder stuff. Because if I felt messed up, at least it was my choice." I stood still. She kept talking. I told myself I'd confess later. That I'd fix it when I was older. When I wasn't scared anymore. Her eyes lifted to mine. But I never got older. I just got worse. She wiped her face again. "And now I'm in withdrawal. I hurt everywhere. And Scott, your dad, he found out I'd been stealing from them. Cash, pills, whatever I could grab." I blinked. "He said he doesn't know who I am anymore." Her voice broke. And that was the moment I realized. "I did that to you first." The cafe felt small suddenly. Like the walls were listening. "I told them," she breathed. "My parents. Your parents. I told them everything." My heart didn't lift. It fell. Because I knew what that meant. Because I knew what would follow. Because I knew what was coming next before she even said it. "They're looking for you, Caspin." Her hands twisted together. "They want to talk to you. They want you to come home." Home. That word hit harder than the accusation ever did. Home was the place they locked me out of. Home was the porch where my belongings were thrown like trash. Home was the people who believed a lie before they looked at me. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't use that word." Iris lowered her head. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "And I know sorry doesn't fix anything." No, it didn't. But it was something the world owed me for 10 straight years. Her voice softened even more. "They're terrified, Caspin. Your dad, he's not doing well. They want to make things right." I felt my jaw tighten. Of course he wanted me back now. Now that the truth had surfaced. Now that the golden fragile girl wasn't golden anymore. Now that their glass house had collapsed, and they needed someone to patch the holes. I didn't hate Iris. I hated the timing. "I didn't tell you this for them," she said, reading the anger in my silence. "I told you because I owed you the truth." And for the first time since the lie that exiled me, I felt something strange. Closure tugging at the edges. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just truth. Raw. Late. Imperfect. But real. I don't expect you to forgive me, Iris said. I don't think you ever should. I took a long breath. That, I said, is the one thing you've said tonight that I believe completely? She nodded slowly. Accepted it. Didn't argue. And that's when the bell over the door jingled again. I didn't need to turn to know who walked in. My father's voice, older now, thinner, broke the air. Caspin, son, please. The past had finally caught up with me. My father looked smaller. Not physically. He was still broad, still tall, but something in his posture had folded inward, like his spine had finally realized the weight of 10 years and couldn't hold it anymore. Genesis stood behind him, hands clenched so tight her knuckles whitened. Both of them looked at Iris first. Not me. Of course they did. Scott stepped forward, voice trembling in a way I had never heard from him. Iris said you were here, he said, breath unsteady. I needed to see you. I didn't answer. Didn't move. Didn't offer him even a fraction of what he wanted. He turned toward me fully, eyes red, jaw tight like he was fighting something inside himself. Caspin, he said. Son. Please talk to me. That word again. Son. It hit different from his mouth. Heavy. Unsteady. Hypocritical. Genesis spoke next. Her voice was a whisper. We were wrong. The cafe went dead quiet around us. Even the espresso machine sounded muted. Iris stood there wringing her hands. She looked terrified, of them, of me, of what came next. Scott took another step forward. When Iris told us what really happened, he said, it was like the floor dropped out from under us. Genesis fainted. He swallowed hard. I couldn't breathe. I stared at him, expression blank, because inside me there was nothing left to give to this man. You didn't even ask me, I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. He closed his eyes. I know. And I can't explain it. I can't defend it. I can't. His voice cracked. I can't understand why I believe the worst of my own child. Iris flinched. My fingers curled against the countertop. You didn't believe the worst, I said. You believed the fastest. The easiest. The one that didn't inconvenience you. Scott froze like I'd slapped him. Good. Let him sit in the truth for once. I deserve better, I said. You did, he whispered. And I failed you. He stepped closer again, and this time I straightened, shoulders stiffening in warning. He noticed. He stopped. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quickly. Not today. Not ever, if that's what you choose. But I'm begging you, let us see you. Let us talk to you. No, I said immediately. Genesis's breath hitched. Caspin, please. We've lost so much. Don't let us lose you forever. You already did, I said. Simple. Honest. Genesis wiped her eyes with trembling hands. We want to make it right. You can't, I said. You're 10 years too late. Scott's voice broke on the next words. I want my son back. I almost laughed. Not bitter. Not cruel. Just disbelieving. You threw your son out, I said. You don't get to retrieve me like old storage you suddenly remembered having. His eyes filled. I didn't look away. We can rebuild, he said. Please. Give us a chance. I shook my head. There's no rebuilding something you demolished with your own hands. He exhaled like he'd been punched. For a long moment, the four of us just stood there. A broken man, a shattered woman, a remorseful liar, and the boy they turned into a ghost. Except I wasn't a boy anymore. I was the only one standing upright. Finally I said, You want to make amends? Then accept this. Scott's breath froze. There is no going back, I said. No starting over. No pretending we're a family again. Genesis put her hand over her mouth. But, I added, there is moving forward. Separately. Quietly. From a distance. Scott blinked fast, trying not to cry. So that's it, he whispered. That's all we get. That's all I have, I said. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was a boundary carved from scar tissue. Scott nodded slowly. Painfully. I understand, he whispered. But his face said otherwise. He stepped back. Then another step. Genesis touched Iris's shoulder and guided her toward the door. Iris hesitated, looking at me one last time. Not for approval. Not for absolution. Just hoping the person she destroyed still saw her as human. I didn't give her an answer. They left quietly. The bell over the door chimed once, and 10 years of silence followed them out. The cafe felt bigger afterward. Emptier. Quieter. I leaned on the counter again, breathing slowly, letting the weight of it settle without crushing me. Iris's confession didn't fix anything. My father's tears didn't repair anything. My mother's trembling apology didn't erase anything. But for the first time since I was 16, the story wasn't unfinished anymore. It was just uncomfortable truth, finally spoken aloud. And the next chapter would belong to me, not them. They didn't come back the next day. Or the next week. Or the week after that. If this were one of those dramatic reunion stories people post online, this is the part where my parents would have written letters, left voicemails, begged from afar, tried to earn their way back piece by piece. But real life is quiet. They vanished just as quickly as they'd reappeared, leaving only the echo of what they wanted and the truth I wasn't willing to give. For a while, I expected something. A message. A letter. A second visit. A new attempt at cracking the boundary I gave them. But nothing came. And in that silence, something strange happened. I started to breathe easier. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But day by day, the shock of seeing them wore off, and my life rebalanced itself around the weight that was suddenly gone. The cafe became normal again. My routine steadied. The new location plans moved forward. Staff meetings, supply orders, scheduling headaches. Those were the things filling my days now, not ghosts. Even my nights felt cleaner. Not peaceful, just less haunted. I kept expecting my brain to flip back into old patterns, to replay the porch, the door lock, the handcuffs, the police station, the car seat pillow. But instead my mind kept replaying something else. Me saying no. Me controlling the terms. Me standing tall while the people who once terrified me trembled. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after that confrontation, Julius called me into his office. He didn't do the whole serious boss thing. He just leaned back in his chair and looked at me the way he does when he's decided something before the conversation even starts. "You're pulling double the weight this place needs," he said. I didn't know if that was praise or a warning. "Is that a problem?" I asked carefully. He snorted. "You tell me. When's the last time you took a day off?" I tried to remember. Failed. Julius nodded like he expected that answer. "You built your life from pieces," he said. "Good. Strong. But you don't have to live like every day is an emergency anymore." I didn't realize how true that was until he said it. "Take tomorrow off," he said. "Go somewhere. Do nothing. Breathe." I opened my mouth to argue. He raised one hand. Not a request. I left his office strangely lighter. The next morning, with no uniform and no shift to rush to, I found myself wandering through a park I hadn't visited in years. The weather was warm. Kids played. People walked dogs. The world didn't feel threatening. It just felt normal. For the first time since I was 16, I wasn't bracing for impact. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it out of habit, expecting a work message. But it was Mario. "You free? I'm near your place. Want to grab food?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then typed back. Yeah. Come by. We met at a little street food truck a block from my apartment. Mario ordered for both of us like he always did back when we were kids sneaking junk food after school. We sat on a bench, eating and talking about nothing. Work, games, some guy at his job who couldn't operate a copy machine to save his life. Eventually, he looked at me and said, "You okay?" After all of that. I thought about it. Really thought. "I'm not broken anymore," I said slowly. "But I don't feel repaired either. More like I'm finally allowed to grow in the direction I want." Mario nodded like that made perfect sense. "Good," he said. "You deserve that." We finished eating. We walked. We talked. Life felt almost like something I could trust again. That night, I returned home to a quiet apartment. As I locked the door behind me, an unexpected feeling crept in. Not fear. Not grief. Not anger. Relief. Relief that my parents were gone. Relief that the truth was spoken. Relief that I didn't let them pull me back into the ruins of the past. Relief that the person they threw away had built someone stronger from the wreckage. I sat on the edge of my bed, elbows on my knees, head bowed. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't collapse. I just breathed. And for the first time, breathing didn't hurt. Little did I know. The past wasn't entirely done with me. Not yet. Not even close. It happened on a Wednesday. Middle of the week. Middle of my shift. Middle of a conversation with the supplier about why half our pastry order had arrived looking like it lost a fistfight inside the delivery truck. In other words, the least cinematic moment possible. I stepped into the back hallway to take the call, leaning against the wall with my phone pressed to my ear, already annoyed and ready to argue about refunds. Then I saw something on the floor. An envelope. Plain. White. My name written on it in handwriting I hadn't seen in a decade. Not mailed. Not stamped. Slipped under the door. My chest tightened, not in fear, just in recognition. I ended the supplier call abruptly, picked up the envelope, and stared at it for a few seconds that felt longer than they should have. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No long paragraphs. No emotional rambling. Just a short message in my father's handwriting. "We're leaving town. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know. I'm proud of the man you became. I'm sorry I wasn't there to see it happen. Scott." There was no address. No phone number. No request. No plea. No attempt to tug me back into their orbit. Just a goodbye. A real one. I stood there in the quiet hallway, the hum of the refrigerators in the background, the smell of coffee drifting in from the front. For the first time since that night on the porch, I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not bitterness. Not satisfaction. Something gentler. A kind of peace, not with him, not with the past, but with myself. I folded the note carefully, not out of sentiment, but because it represented a door finally closing without slamming. I went back to the counter. Julius glanced at me. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. And for once, it was completely true. That night after closing, I walked home through the familiar streets. The world felt warm. Alive. Open in ways it hadn't been before. At my apartment door, I paused, listening to the quiet around me. No sirens. No shouting. No fear creeping under my ribs. Just quiet. I stepped inside and let the door click shut behind me. For a moment, I stood in the darkness of my apartment, letting the weight of the day settle. When I finally turned on the light, my reflection in the hallway mirror caught my eye. Not the scared 16-year-old. Not the ghost my parents created. Not the boy who slept in his car and woke up to a world that didn't want him. Just me. A man who'd built a life. A man who'd survived. A man whose story no longer belonged to the people who ruined its first chapter. I didn't forgive them. I didn't hate them either. They weren't part of my life anymore, and that was enough. I locked the door. Not out of fear. Out of ownership. Out of choice. Out of the simple, quiet understanding that this life, this home, this future, belonged to me. And nothing they did or didn't do would ever take that away again. 3 days after the envelope, I woke up before sunrise. No reason. No alarm. Just awake. The apartment was quiet in that deep, early morning way where even the refrigerator hum sounds softer. I made coffee, sat on the balcony, and watched the sky lighten. It felt like one of those rare moments where life pauses just long enough for you to notice how far you've come. I didn't think about my parents. Not at first. But somewhere between the first and second cup, something settled in my chest, a realization as simple as it was strange. I didn't feel unfinished anymore. For years, my life felt like a wound that never closed because someone else held the stitching thread. I kept waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, a confession, justice, anything, to make the scar mean something other than loss. But now, the truth was out. They were gone. And my life was still here. Around noon, Mario stopped by unannounced, which was normal for him. He held up a paper bag like a peace offering. "Brought food," he said. "You looked like you needed vegetables last time I saw you." "I'm fine," I told him. "Yeah. And I'm a professional violinist." We ate on the balcony. He didn't bring up my parents immediately. He talked about work, his girlfriend, some dumb argument he had with his landlord about whether a pet turtle counted as an animal under the lease terms. Eventually, he glanced at me sideways. "So, you good? After everything?" I thought about it honestly instead of defaulting to the easy lie. "I don't feel angry," I said. "That's good. And I don't feel broken. Or stuck. That's better. But I do feel weirdly sad." Mario nodded thoughtfully. "Because the apology wasn't enough?" "No," I said. "Because the apology came from people I don't know anymore." That landed heavier than I expected. I wasn't grieving the parents I had. I was grieving the parents I never got to have. And somehow, that made all the difference. Mario leaned back. "You don't owe them anything. You know that, right?" "I know. And you still get to decide if you want something to change in the future." "Not today." "Not soon. Just whenever." I didn't answer because I didn't need to. He knew me well enough to understand silence. That evening, after Mario left, I cleaned my apartment, not because it was dirty, but because I needed something simple and physical to ground me. Laundry. Dishes. Sweeping. Folding. When I opened the drawer where I'd put my father's letter, I paused. For a second, I thought about throwing it away. But I didn't. Instead, I folded it again, carefully, and placed it back. Not because it meant reconciliation. Not because it healed anything. But because it proved something important. I wasn't the kid they abandoned anymore. I wasn't defined by what they did or didn't do. And I didn't need revenge or forgiveness to move forward. I already had. Weeks passed. The new cafe branch opened. Business grew. I hired 2 new staff members. Julius trusted me with more than I ever expected when I was a scared kid mopping floors for cash under the table. Iris wrote me one more letter from rehab. It was honest. It was messy. It didn't excuse anything. And it didn't ask for a place in my life. It ended with, "I don't want to be part of your story again unless you choose it. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make sure I never hurt anyone the way I hurt you." I didn't respond. But I didn't throw it away either. Some wounds don't need closure. They just need distance. Months later, on an ordinary morning, I unlocked the cafe, flipped the lights on, and stood behind the counter breathing in the smell of roasted beans and warm bread. This life wasn't supposed to be mine. Not according to the 16-year-old version of me who thought he'd die in the back seat of a cold car. Not according to the police who wrote "suspect" on their forms. Not according to the parents who decided I was disposable. But it was mine. Every piece of it. I built it from the ground up, The way people build shelters after storms. Not out of hope, but out of stubborn survival. And the funniest part? I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. Really living. As I wiped down the counter before opening the doors, a thought came to me, quiet, unforced, and unexpectedly soft. What happened to me isn't who I am. What I did afterward is. And with that, I unlocked the front door for the morning rush. A new day. A new chapter. A life no one could take from me again.